Hi, I'm Angela Ferguson. I am Onondaga Eel Clan, and I am the supervisor of the Onondaga Nation farm, where we grow all our traditional foods for our community members, and we're trying to bring back all of our pre-colonial diet, bring the health and wellness back to our people, and also honor all of our relatives, not only the three sisters, but also getting back into foraging, hunting, fishing, medicine gathering, and things like that.
So it's my understanding that a lot of the items that are here are heirloom, or there's something that's been passed down through generations. The seeds, the corn, the beans, they've all been protected. They've been reintroduced. They've been traded. They've been held on to by families and protected and things like that. And one of the things you've been talking about is our relationship to these as kind of stewards of these products and these medicines, as you were referring to them. Tell me a little bit about that, Angela. I know that you've been doing a lot of this work. I know you've been traveling about throughout a lot of different territories, Haudenosaunee territories and beyond. But, you know, what has it been like for you to reconnect with a lot of these things? And maybe you can kind of point out some of the seeds as you go through it and just kind of talk maybe a little bit about where they come from, or where you may have, you know, there's a lot of stories that are behind these, as Arlie had mentioned. Can you share just a little bit about some of these as you go through, and then maybe we'll go around the table, and there's a few items on here that are interesting that we may want to talk about and let people know that these things are available and that they're useful for us in many ways.
Some of these seeds are just so amazing, you know, there's a story behind every one, and I don't know how much you really want me to talk, but I could tell you long stories about everything. And when I think about it, like even this blue corn, you know, this blue corn that I brought from the farm, you know, we use that in so many different things, different ceremonies, and it's so important to us. It helps our minds, and this corn, I got the seeds from Cyril Pudgy Printup in Tuscarora, and Norton Rickard Gahat and Jiggy Hill Gahat used to grow this all the time. This was, I always remember Jiggy having braids of that, and he always had that blue corn going, and after he passed, Norton Rickard Gahat kept it going, and then Pudgy Printup kept it going, and for a while there, he was down for a little bit, and I said, I'll keep it going, you know, and I kept that growing out in Onondaga while he was on the mend, and I was really excited when he was finally better to bring back braids of corn, you know, so that's the whole thing, is that we never just take, right? We always bring back too, because that's a good feeling, you know, it's not something you're obligated to do, but it's our natural way is always to give back, so
Sure.
That's what we kept that going. And this one, this Oneida bean came from Ganondagan. We used to trade with Ganondagan moose meat. They have communal meals in their community, and so we used to trade them for beans, you know, because we wanted to build up our seed varieties of beans. And the Ganondagan growers, they're doing amazing things out there. They gave us these yellow eye Oneida or Gagne beans. And this strawberry, the Haudenosaunee strawberry popcorn, I really love this because I had heard about this and read about this in A.C. Parker's books, talking about these red and white strawberry popcorn, and I never saw it. And then I ran into Janice Brandt from Tyandanaga, and her family had been growing that for many generations, and she gifted me one little tiny cob, and I just loved it. It's shaped like a heart, and I didn't even want to take the seeds off to grow it, but I did. And now, you know, people are eating that. And you just wouldn't think in a couple of years from just starting out with that one little cob, we were able to give little bundles to all of our elders in the community. And this one is very special to me because this is the Onondaga und Gustung, and Virgil Thomas Gahat who was chief, he was very protective, so protective of this seed, and he always had that growing on the Onondaga Nation. He had gotten the seed from his father, and he kept it going down, and it was funny because I used to harvest for years, and then I'd get it all ready and give it to him, and actually the last year before he passed away, he said, take half of that harvest. And I was like, wow, really? And he said, yep, take half. He said, because you've done so much over the years, and I want you to keep this going. But it took me a long time for him to develop that trust, to say, okay, you know, now you're, I trust you, and you're worthy of going ahead to keep that going. I know that you'll do it in the right way. And so now we shared seeds with, you know, many other growers in the community, and I just love this corn. This is our Oneida flag, you know, red, white, and blue. This is what our, you know, this is our democracy right here, that red, white, and blue. And this Mohawk red corn, I just love this. If anyone ever can grow this and taste it, you're going to love it. This Mohawk red corn, we got the seeds from Kenny Perkins out in Akwesasne Mohawk. We used to do a lot of seed trades, and then we would have seed meetings where our farm crew would go out there and meet up with their growers, and he sent that back with us because this had whittled down to just a few, you know, a few growers, and this corn is amazing. And this was the original wedding corn, this red corn, this Mohawk red corn. And this was also included in A.C. Parker's research. They were made in 2 little cornbread bundles that were connected through the center, right, with the husks. So it was almost like a connected tamale, right? There were 2 little cornbread bundles, and that showed, that represented the marriage. So, yeah, that's my story about that one. These also came from Ganondagan. These are the skunk beans, and what's amazing is they're black and white in your hand, but when you cook them, they turn purple, and they look like wampum. So, yeah, and the water turns like this blackish purple, like a real deep purple. So it's really amazing when you start cooking up some of these beans. They all have a different flavor. They all have a different texture and a different taste. So this was another variety that had come from the Ganondagan growers. And over here, I have this little jar. Ted Williams from the Oneida Nation used to come out to Onondaga. The people there were telling me he would come out for the midwinter ceremony and make this 13 bean soup. And so I thought, I want to do that. That's why I brought this jar here today, and all the different varieties that we grew. I couldn't fit them all in one jar, so there's 10 in here, and there's 3 in here, and there's the 13 beans, yeah. So that's the story behind that. And then these little mush sticks here that are used, these came from the Navajo people, and if anybody can get a hold of one of these are the greatest things ever invented, because it's our Onondaga whisk. And the mush never sticks to the bottom of the pots, and you don't scratch your pots. And it's made out of a ghost bush. They call it ghost bush, and they only gather at certain times of the year. But it withstands the heat, and they never, you know, they never dry or crack. They're break, and they're really amazing. So these are the bear paws, and these bear paw beans are another one, just amazing and delicious. And the Mohawks use these a lot in their corn soups. So what's kind of cool is that when you travel to different communities, you get to see how they make their corn soup. And the Mohawk corn soup always has so many different vegetables and varieties in it, and it's just so pleasant to have. This is what that strawberry popcorn looks like when it's in the field. It's a little short plant, maybe 3 or 4 feet high. And you'll get 5 or 6 or more sometimes on that little bundle. So they produce a lot. And these beans right here, I started out with 18 beans. And when I first wanted to start the farm crew, I was putting my head together. How am I going to ask the Onondaga Council of Chiefs? And I had 18 beans in my hand. And I told them, if you guys let me do this, I'll take these 18 beans and I'll feed the whole Confederacy with these 18 beans. And they kind of chuckled at me and, oh yeah, sure, Ange, you know. And when we were at one of the Great Law recitals, there was 1,000 people there, and we ate these all the time for every meal. We put them in the corn soup. This is our original bean that was in the corn soup. And I said, remember when I told you guys 7 years ago that I was going to feed the whole Confederacy with those 18 beans? Here we are, you know, and it was 5 years later. So, yeah, that's my story on that. And the reason this is present, because this is one of our most important assets right here, is corn silk. This isn't something we should be putting as compost, because this is a very powerful medicine. This has helped many of our people throughout the pandemic. It is the cure for diabetes right there. And if we start implementing this back into our diets, it helps with depression. It helps with insomnia. It helps us with getting ourselves regulated and have that relationship to the corn, because that's all the energy that comes from the sky. That comes straight from the sky through those corn silks to that plant. And when we take this, that's what's happening to us. We're getting sky world energy that's coming through that. You can use that in soup bases. You can use that in any of your mush. You can boil it and use that water. There's so many different things we can do with that. And so I want to encourage people, when they're harvesting their corn, save the silk, and all you do is dry it out, and you can use that, put it in a paper bag, and use it all year long.
These are what the commercial world will call Jerusalem artichokes. I know the story behind how it got its name, but that's not us. I mean, this is the Sunchokes. And when I learned about the Sunchokes and did some research on them, the amazing things that I found about them was that we grew this in the same amounts as our corn. These were grown either surrounding the cornfields, or they were grown intermittent throughout the cornfields. Can you imagine how much of this we had? The biggest thing that I take away from this is that it has the plant version of what's called linsolin, which the human body makes insulin. And when we think about how we were separated from these relatives, all of these relatives, and they were taken from us, and we were separated, how our diets were affected. The three big killers we talk about: heart disease, high blood pressure, and diabetes. Along with all of our relatives, we took those away from us, and how many people had died because, including my mother, from diabetes. So reintroducing these things, all these relatives, getting to know that relationship again. They're a tuber. It looks a lot like ginger root, but the flavor, whatever you do with potatoes, you can do with these. And they're just phenomenal. They're great. I think as we talked about, the next step in this whole thing that we're doing is, while we've recognized the decolonization, and now I want to share real quick. First time I heard that word was probably 2010, 8, somewhere around there, maybe a little bit before that. I was at a food summit with my good friend Nephi Craig down in Arizona, and we were on our way to the Sonora Museum where we were having the summit where we were going to cook, and there was 4 of us in this truck, his rickety old truck, and we were going down the road, and we started talking about our diets, we started talking about our foods, and it was Nephi who put that word in my head, that we need to decolonize our diet. We need a decolonization process. And everybody was all on board. Yeah, that's great, that's great. And so I had posed the question to everyone then: how do we do that? What's next? And silence for about 30 minutes left of that ride. It was just, you're right. You look around. I looked around. I could just see the wheels turning, and everybody said, "What do we do? What is next?" So for all this time, up to this point now, so that's probably about 10 years now, everybody's been doing their part. Everybody has been doing and saying, okay, let's do this. We need to get back into the woods. We need to get back into the fields. We need to we need to put up a good front for the fight against Monsanto at the time. That was the big buzzword, you know, the all those things. That was a great thing that happened. It was a really cool movement. So then the next movement that I saw come through was the younger ones really starting to take a hold of our, you know, of our foods. Let's find, we have identified our foods. We know what we are, but what do we do with them, you know? How do we prepare them? So that was our next step. And a lot of them are some of the ideas that came out of that was we want to be, I can't remember the word that they used, but they want to be recognized. You know, we want to be recognized not only as Indigenous people, but this is our foods. They're real. We have to do something with our foods. And as chefs, as cooks, as culinarians, or whatever word you want to use for us, we're real. We're here. You're not going to get rid of us, you know. And that's a great thing that's happening. I just saw a story on young lady who was invited to the CIA to give a talk on our foods, on Indigenous people's foods. What a wonderful thing to happen. You know, whether or not the outside world will take us seriously, whether or not we just get past that buzzword of Indigenous foods, of Indigenous people foods, who knows? But it's getting there now. And I think the next thing that's going to happen now that I think we had talked about real briefly, and I hope we find maybe start the path to that, is because of a lot of these foods have been lost or forgotten. That DNA in our body is that for the flavors. Claudia Serrato, God bless her heart, I love her so dearly. For whatever reason, her talk that she had given back at that summit was on the concept of flavors in the womb and how a child will develop its flavors even in the womb while it's growing, while it's in the mother. For some reason, that idea has stuck with me for all these years. And now it makes sense now. These foods, these flavors have to be reintroduced into our children's diets. And that's going to happen through the young people. That's going to be through our continuing educating them and encouraging them to start eating these foods. Learn how you don't have to make the big meals. You don't have to be a chef to learn how to cook. And that's why this is so important, a simple pot of beans. Start simple, start with these. You will find that they will speak to you. You'll hear those voices. You'll find those flavors all of a sudden come back. And the next thing you know, the next generation has that. They remember. It's not something that you have to constantly eat your food, eat your veggies. It's there. They'll have it. And we want to keep going. That's the next step. So we always talk about the next 7 generations. It's time. It's really time for those next generations to start reintroducing these foods, get it back in our DNA. Cooking in the clay pots, that's a great thing for us. I think it's a really nice way to understand the flavors, the original flavors, but it's not always necessary. And we'll continue to do that. We'll continue to push that forward. We'll continue to bring those ideas out. But just get the food into the people. Learn how to grow. You know, like Angie said, the knowledge is there to grow. So is the knowledge of cooking it. You know, how do we treat these? You don't have to, it's not just corn soup. It's not just corn mush. Whatever you can do with it, whatever you can make with it. The popcorn. Instead of sitting around with a bag of Orville Redenbachers watching movies on family night, take the little extra time and make some red popcorn. Watch the movie with that, with our food, with our original foods. Why not? How hard is that? One of my favorite foods I grew up, and I still go back to it now whenever I think about my mother and and I feel lonely for her is to put that pot of beans on the stove, you know, in the crock pot before I go to work, before the day, when I start my day, and by the end of the day for dinner, I have those. I have those beans, I have that memories, and everything's okay. And everything will be okay. And as much as I miss her, she's there with me then. And it's because it's something simple, like a pot of beans. So that's where we want to start. That's how, simple pot of beans, or a simple pot of corn mush. You know, it doesn't have to be an elaborate meal. Many times, in my research, the things that I hear is that pot of something, you know, whether it be stew, whether it be beans, whether it be corn soup, but it was always that one pot that you would find cooking in the longhouse. Everybody's family had something going in the longhouse in that pot, whether it be, again, corn soup, stew, mush, whatever it was, that's what it was. That's what we had. And it was medicine, and it kept us together, kept the people together.